Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In lecture 58, we will cover urban forestry, parks and open spaces. The different concepts that we will cover are on urban greens, benefits of urban green spaces, standards for provision of green areas, type of urban greens, URDPFI guidelines, policies on improving urban green areas. Then we will look into the Nagar Van Yojana in 2021. And we will do a case study on Warje urban forest in Pune. Now, as we know, urban green spaces and forest improve the overall quality of life of residents. So, we are all aware that if there are green areas in the surroundings, it improves our quality of life. It improves many things. For example, green infrastructures, including trees and other shrubs and other vegetation, they provide many environmental services. What are those? They clean the air. So, that means they produce oxygen, they absorb CO2, so they clean the air, of course, then improves the local environment in general terms, they improves the microclimate, they may reduce the heat island effect as well, then groundwater recharge, because there are green areas, it allows water to percolate, flood mitigation and also provide recreational opportunities and aesthetic pleasure. So, green areas is a big deal in today's context, considering the flood events that are happening in urban areas, and we usually want to provide blue-green infrastructure, which basically is green areas where we allow water to recharge or to store water for certain times so that it doesn't create floods. But in master plans and development plans, green areas, there is no separate classification as a green area, but it's classified under areas for recreational use. So, there are several permitted and restricted or other kinds of activities which are there, but I will talk about the permitted activities mostly. So, these are regional parks, district parks, playgrounds for kids, children traffic parks, botanical gardens, zoological gardens, bird sanctuaries, clubs, stadiums, outdoor stadiums, it can include picnic huts, holiday resorts, shooting ranges, sports training centers, specialized parks and maidans for multiple uses, like we can hold fairs, we can hold certain public rallies, all these things over there. Then swimming pool, special recreational and special educational areas, libraries, public utilities and so on. So, these are certain things which could also happen in these particular areas. Now, the percentage of recreational areas out of the overall developable area in a city, it is assumed that for small and medium cities, it should be around 12 to 14%. Whereas for large cities, metropolitan, million plus cities and even megalopolises, this value should be a little bit higher, which is 14 to 16%. So, this is as per URDPFI guidelines 2015. Now, coming to the benefits, we largely know about the different benefits of green area spaces, but just to summarize, there are physical benefits, social benefits, benefits from planning, economic benefits and so on. For example, whenever we are having green spaces and all, we will pay premium for plots and residences abutting these green spaces. So, if there is a eco park, then of course, if I come up with a plot beside that eco park, it will cost more. Then urban shady trees reduces building air conditioning load and improves urban air quality by reducing smog. So, overall that improves the quality of life in that area, as well as people will be willing to pay more for that area. Neighborhood parks also increases the overall transaction cost for green areas. Now, when we look into the kinds of how it helps in urban planning, urban parks are separators, you can say, or you can say that those urban parks also helps in tying up different functions, right? So, a hierarchy and network of these parks or green spaces, it can integrate the different land uses, it can bring the different land uses. and it can improve the accessibility and attractiveness of local facilities. Of course, if there is a park, people can cut through, and then it can improve accessibility, and also it improves the overall attractiveness of an area. It also encourages people to travel safely by foot and bicycle. People can use the parks and all to travel through that. If there are large parks and all, you can use those pathways where they can travel by foot or bicycle and in a safe way. And overall, it can act as a visual barrier so that it can be barrier between different kinds of land uses. Different social benefits are there: safe play spaces for children, cultural life, improves cultural life, providing venues for festivals, emphasis diversity of urban areas, so it contributes to social interactions, offer wide range of land uses and activities, and also stimulate senses. So these are standard benefits of green spaces. And physical benefits, we have learnt about this already. For example, it stabilization of soil, increases water catchment in floodplain surfaces, improvement of air, water and land resources, provide habitat for wildlife, reduce noise pollution, air pollution, greenhouse gas reduction. Wind breaks in winter, trees and all can break the cold wind during winter, temperature buffer in summer, so it reduces the overall temperature of an area. So all these are different benefits of provision of green spaces. Now let us look at the standards, starting with initial standards developed primarily in Japan and Germany. It was around 40 square meters per capita. The idea was, like, if I provide a lot of greenery, it will reduce pollution, it will improve the air quality and so on. So initially it was 40 square meter per capita of green space of high quality, and 140 square meter suburb forest area per capita. So if it is in the suburb area, and then it is a little bit more. If it's core urban areas, it was considered as 40 square meter per capita. Now currently the general standard in developed countries is something around 20 square meter park area per capita, whereas WHO recommends 9 square meter of undeveloped, unpaved open spaces for every inhabited, that means per capita. So, or this another part that is also considered is how far away is this particular green space from your actual build or your actual home. So here it says that residents has to live within 15 minutes of walking distance from an open space. Why? Because people can use this open space for many functions, and 15 minutes is the threshold limit beyond which people will not be willing to walk to a particular open space. So that's why these two standards are given by WHO. In India, UNDP guidelines are created also for determining what number of urban parks and all should be given in an urban area, and usually that is based on the concept that for every person we should have 10 to 12 square meter of open spaces or green areas in an urban area. And NBC also has given some suggestions where it is particularly related with within a building or within a group of buildings, that comes to around 3 square meter per person as the very minimum norm that has to be provided. This particular chart shows the open spaces in urban areas in India. Blue is the existing amount of space in square meters, whereas this saffron is the proposed open space in square meters. So you can see that different cities like Chennai, Varanasi, Jaipur has got existing how much amount of open spaces they have got. The blue is an indicator of that, whereas in other places this yellow shows that how much there is proposed in the coming master plans and so on. So you can see that for Bangalore we are current is very low, it has to be increased, whereas for Varanasi current shows pretty high, where the proposed is very less. In the coming master plan, the amount of new green space proposed is much lesser. So in accordingly for different Indian cities, as per different master plans, these are the different provisions that has been created. Now, what are the different types of green areas in an urban area? Starting with, we have reserve forest. This is of course notified under the provisions of the Indian Forest Act. All activities are prohibited. So mostly all activities are prohibited. We cannot use it for recreation and all. Then there are protected forests. These are found in urban and peri-urban areas. These are secured by fencing and wall. Construction is not too much allowed, but it could be utilized by people for walking or just for visiting and so on. Then there are national parks, which are for protection and conservation of outstanding natural flora, fauna, geographical formations and natural scenic areas people can visit, but there are some limits to it, and usually the amount of activities are much less. Then there are district parks. These are no longer considered as forest and that kind of intense greenery. These are district parks which are highest levels of green spaces that has to be provided in a city, which comes to around 40,000 square meter and which is roughly serves around 2,50,000 people. For every 2,50,000, 40,000 square meter of space needs to be provided. Neighborhood parks, for every 10,000 persons, around 2 to 4,000 square meter of park should be provided. Then for tot lots, for every 2,500 people, around 125 square meter of tot lots could be provided. And these are the lowest level of green areas in the city, and usually these are play areas for children. Whereas neighborhood level parks as well as district level parks could be used for sport events or for playing for for games like football, cricket, or for larger children. Then playgrounds could be also provided inside educational institutions or within neighborhoods, and usually they serve around 5,000. For every 5,000 population we should have playgrounds. Then green belts are buffer areas which are provided. This includes either green girdles, park belts, rural zones, agricultural belts, country belts, agricultural green belts. There are different variations to it, different names are given, but primarily these are green stretches which creates as boundaries for certain activities, or like for example you want the urban area growth to be prevented, we will provide these green belts so that we cannot expand beyond that, right? Then green strips are basically vacant lands in an urban area where we can take up certain kind of plantations and all, probably land under high tension power supply lines or along arterial roads. We can put certain stretches of greenery. And then tree cover is basically trees planted along the roads within the ROW, maybe at the edges and as well as in the central media. So coming to the URDPFI guidelines, first of all, URDPFI specifies hierarchy of green open spaces. For example, for housing clusters and neighborhoods, it suggests 3 to 4 local parks and playgrounds. For community area, maybe a larger area, 2 to 3 community level parks and open spaces. So these are community level spaces where people from the entire city can come. And then district means it may include multiple areas. At district level, one district level park and sports center and Maidan particularly. Then sub-city center, which may not be a district but a smaller part, part of a very large megalopolis and so on, larger area. One city level park, sports complex, botanical zoological garden, Maidan and so on. Now this Maidan or this district level parks, these are spatially distributed and as per the population, or it could be spread out in different parts of the city. And these are basically open spaces and Maidans where multiple functions could be held at different points of time. Then based on the population threshold and area requirement for these different multi-purpose grounds, these are probably the larger parks, not the community or the neighborhood level parks. So you can see community level multi-purpose ground or district level multi-purpose ground or city, sub-city level multi-purpose ground. So here you can see for population served 1 lakh, area requirement is 2 hectares, whereas district level multipurpose ground are given for population served 5 lakhs. There we give area for 4 hectares. Probably if the population is double, we can give 2 parks. And then if it's a sub-city level multipurpose ground, it serves around, particularly for city areas, it serves a larger population of 10 lakhs and area requirement is something around 8 hectares. And this chart is based on the Delhi Master Plan. So this is a recent plan which has come up. Based on that, these areas have been formulated. Now, other URDPFI guidelines for green spaces in plain areas, for a housing area or you can see that for different housing units, if its population served is around 5,000, then total park area requirement is 0.5 hectares. For a neighborhood, population served is 15,000. Then park area required is 1 hectare. So if it is 30,000 population is being served, then we can double it as well. Then for community parks, district parks, sub-city parks, these are the values which are also provided. So district parks or sub-city parks could range to even 25 hectares or even 100 hectares. Now the same things for green spaces or hilly areas. Of course, the values would be a little bit different. So housing area, neighborhood parks serve similar population, and the sizes are all from 0.5 to 1 hectares, and for neighborhood parks it's 1.2 to 2 hectares. So the size area requirement is a little bit higher. Then city parks, playgrounds, maidans, exhibitions. For inter-town, maybe one can be provided depending on space availability and all, which is usually limited in hilly areas. Then botanical gardens should be there, at least one for every town, and recreational complex including zoo, maybe one for every settlement with tourist potential. So these are the different standards which are provided by URDPFI. Then in regards to open spaces, or we can say some of them should include parks, or it could include other kinds of like stadiums or area sports complexes and so on. So overall, considering open spaces for different sizes of areas or urban areas, for small towns, it is usually the standard considered is 1 to 1.2 hectares per 1,000 persons for town level open spaces, and this should be in addition to the open spaces that are provided in the residential pockets. So these are town level open spaces. Then it should be distributed uniformly in residential areas for population of 8,000 to 10,000. So this is, first we determine the total area required, and then we can distribute them for every 10,000 or 8,000 people. We can distribute these parks, and you can determine the park sizes are given earlier. Open spaces are to be developed with other socio-cultural commercial facilities and can serve multiple purposes. For median towns, the value is a little bit higher, 1.4 to 1.6 hectares per 1,000 persons, and lower income areas shall be provided with more open spaces compared to large, higher income areas. And large city, metropolitan and megalopolises, here the standard is 1.2 to 1.4 hectare per 1,000 person, depending on land availability, because usually these are very high dense areas. And if older parts of the city are deficient, that means earlier developments were very congested, people have not provided parks, planners, it was not possible to provide parks earlier. In that case, new development should compensate this deficiency. That means new development should give additional open spaces so that this deficiency could be met up. Similarly, botanical and zoological parks, picnic huts, children park, amusement parks, etc. can also be provided in metropolitan areas and megalopolises. Now, some other norms and for recreational spaces as given in NBC, something like community open space in land measuring greater than 0.3 hectares or more in residential and commercial zones to be reserved for recreational purposes. And the minimum size should be around 450 square meter, and more or less the shape should be something around, the depth should not be less than 7.5 meter and the length should not exceed 2.5 times of the average width or depth, whatever you want to call it. Now, usually how do I reserve spaces in urban areas? Usually we go for government reserved land, particularly for provision of green spaces, or where we don't want to do any kind of commercial activity, those kind of spaces. But sometimes if I feel that certain areas will require green spaces or areas, or we can even do something with that particular area, like some sort of activity, economic or otherwise, in that case we can also take in privately owned land, but in that case we have to compensate the people from whom I am taking this land, and there the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency Act should be followed. Now, in addition to all these green spaces and all, we also have requirement for sports facilities. URDPFI also specifies requirement for sports facilities, such as for residential unit play area, the population served is around 5,000. The land area required is around 5,000 square meter. Whereas for neighborhood play area, for population served is 15,000. Land area required is 1.5 hectares. For district sports center and divisional sports center, similarly for serves 1 lakh and 10 lakh people respectively, and the areas are 8 and 20 hectares also as per that particular facility. Now, how do I improve green areas, introduce green areas in urban areas? So usually we can do it along roads. So we can do different plantation schemes along roads, but we should consider traffic safety, of course, because trees shed their leaves and usually they can create slippery surfaces and so on. Then usually we use quick growing trees which can provide shade during the summer, particularly this is important for the Indian context. Trees with umbrella and semi-umbrella crowns are preferred. And for road width greater than 30 meters, we can go for double avenue plantation. That means to plant trees on both sides of the street. And brittle and thorny trees should be avoided. Otherwise, people may get scratched or they may have certain other problems. Now, how is this different plantations provided on the road? We can go for avenue planting, that is to provide plantation on both sides of the road. It could be single or double rows along highways. On divided carriageway with separate footpaths, outer row of shady trees and inner row of ornamental flowering plants could be also there. So that means we can have two layers as well. And then we can go for group planting, that is to break down the monotony of avenue plantation. We can have certain areas where groups or a cluster of trees could be planted, 3 to 4 trees could be planted. But of course, land has to be available. If land is available, we can go for that. Then mixed planting consists of different varieties of trees, and this also breaks down the monotony of single trees. And informal planting could be done in urban fringes. Avenue planting may include formal landscape and sometimes informal one. And single trees may be featured where practical and providing certain kinds of visual interest, right? So overall, we can have different kind of plantation schemes in urban areas. Now, the spacing of trees in urban areas or particularly along streets varies from 10 to 12 meter for normal avenue planting, but at intersections we can bring them to 3 meter. So then for different areas such as waterlogged areas and all, we should have proper landscape treatment as per that particular how much water is there and what sort of water levels are there, or is it permanently inundated, and depending on many conditions. And species selection is as per waterlogged conditions so that it doesn't require too much maintenance. Then similarly for sand areas, we can have species which are water requirement, which doesn't require so much water and are wind resistant. Then for industrial areas, we should plant trees so that it acts as a visual barrier and also a barrier for noise and air pollution in those areas. And in case of chemical industries and all, we can advise thick green buffer so that it can take care of some amount of the noxious fumes that comes out from this kind of industries. And for planting areas, parking areas and all, we have to be careful that the leaves that are shade doesn't block the drains or doesn't create other problems and or doesn't create flooding in that particular areas. And for that, deciduous trees which shade leaves at certain intervals are probably should not be given for parking areas. Now, coming to a program from the government which is Nagar Van Yojana. This is to introduce green spaces in urban areas and particularly in areas where there is lack of it. So, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has come up with this particular program, and the implementation is done by National Afforestation and Eco Development Board. And earlier this scheme is actually replacing the earlier scheme of Nagar Van Udyan scheme, which actually stated that we have to come out with forest areas inside. We have to develop areas which are forest land of 10 hectares and larger within municipality limit. We can develop that, but as you understand that such large lands are not available everywhere, so there were some issues. So that's why now it is modified to this new Nagar Van Yojana. Now what we can do under that? So the aim is to develop around 400 Nagar Vans and 200 Nagar Vatikas. Now Nagar Vans are the larger ones, which size should be greater than 10 hectares up to around 50 hectares, whereas Nagar Vatikas could be provided in congested areas which overcomes this problem, and it is greater than 1 hectare but up to a limit of 10 hectares. Now this kind of sites could be developed 5 km within the city limit, from the city limit, and areas other than forest land is actually allowed. And proposals from ULBs have to go to the State Forest Department for financial assistance, and usually it is based on the amount of money that they will be invested, that is based on the project report. What is the estimate? Based on that, funding would be done. Maximum value is around 2 crores per Nagar Van or Vatika, and the rate of calculation is around 4 lakh rupees per hectare. That is how you estimate the overall cost of this particular project. Now, PPP mode could be utilized for doing collaboration with private companies to develop this kind of Nagar Vans and Vatikas, and of course we require active participation of people, students and other stakeholders for that particular area. And Nagar Vans should have a minimum of 2/3 areas under woodland or tree cover. The rest of the areas could be entertainment areas, some buildings, some other facilities and so on, but 2/3 of the area should be under woodland or tree cover. The State Forest Department, project management units and National Afforestation and Eco Development Boards are the ones who are the monitoring authorities for this kind of projects. So, what is done inside this project? So, of course, the area is fenced off to protect it from encroachers. Emphasis on locally appropriate trees and shrubs, theme-based plantations like Smriti Van, then Rashi Nakshatra Van, then plants to include variety to represent floral biodiversity, irrigation rainwater harvesting facility, establishment and maintenance of public conveniences such as drinking water facilities, benches, walkways, footpaths, jogging tracks, cycle tracks, so on, so that people can enjoy this kind of spaces, and establishment and maintenance of information and extension center, including information kiosk, display boards, signage, information brochures, and so on. So overall, it's a nice urban park or a green space where people can come and enjoy. And of course, it has got some environmental functions as well. Now, revenue generation also could be done through some economic activities in this particular parks, either from sale of seedlings or saplings or value-added processed forest products, or some kiosks could be set up for selling, some recreational facilities, some fairs and festival could be also organized, but obviously 2/3 should be fully covered by plants or trees. Now, benefits some of benefits are obvious, like carbon sequestration, reduction in temperature and urban heat island, space having aesthetic value, cooling and calming effect on the people, development, and it makes the city's climate resilient and provides ecosystem services, indirect efforts on promotion of tourism, and then it helps the overall urban economy of that area or improves the urban development of that area, economic development of that area, increases land prices and so on. And urban forests could offer several positive community, physical and mental health benefits as well. So finally, we come down to a case study of Varje urban forest in Pune, which is where 16 hectares of barren hill areas were converted into forest by the forest department, and this stopped encroachment by slums and builders. And obviously, this area has got rich fertile soil and abundant water that was introduced, and then this area absorbs around a lot of CO2 per year. The estimate is around 1,29,000 kilograms of CO2 per year and produces around 5,62,000 kilograms of oxygen per year. So, of course, these are the basic benefits of providing green spaces. And in addition, around 9,500 plants are introduced, 23 species, indigenous species are introduced, 29 local bird species, 15 butterfly species, 10 reptile species and 3 mammal species are found in this particular forest. And it also provides good walkway and place for morning and evening walks for the people, and usually around 1,000 to 15,000 people visit this Smriti Van every day, which is a place for remembrance of other people and so on. So this is how urban forest can play a major role in improving the quality of life as well as the environment in urban areas. So these are some of the references that you can study. To conclude, while we have discussed guidelines on provision of urban green spaces, the location is discussed as per decided as per other social infrastructure and facilities as we have discussed earlier. Thank you.